So after seeing the image that went right across the Caribbean, from the Eastern Caribbean to the wider Caribbean, that had people talking about the Eastern Caribbean leaders lining up in single file to go into the White House to meet with Marco Rubio. So since that day, people have been questioning what really happened in that meeting with the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So in today's video, we're seeing that there are information coming out, and some of the prime ministers across the Eastern Caribbean have been talking about their experience with that meeting in the White House. So today I want to take a look at two of those leaders in the Caribbean. And first, we're going to take a look at Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, talking about his experience within that meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and what was the takeaway from the meeting. So this is the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
As passports and citizenship under the rubric of citizenship by investment. Raised the issue. The Secretary of State didn't respond to it. They've stated what their position was earlier. And we talked about support for regional institutions like CDMA and the RSS. Practical matters of concern, issues about the trafficking in arms, guns and bullets, practical matters which are of concern to everybody in our sub-region, making sure that we have understandings as to, if challenges arise, the modalities through which we will express our respective positions on tariffs, because we had decided that in the OECS that the 10% baseline tariff on goods from the OECS wasn't of any significance, because the extent of the exports of goods from our sub-region is not a big number in the case of St. Vincent and Grenadines, as I pointed out to Parliament. Is 0.32 of 1% of GDP, of our gross domestic product.
Okay, so that was the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines sharing for the first time publicly what took place in that White House meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. And as you could tell, the items that came up, they spoke about the citizenship by investment program. They spoke about illegal firearms coming into the Caribbean out of the United States of America. And there are a lot more things that was in that meeting, that they spoke about in that meeting. So the next person I want to look at is Philip Pierre. Philip Pierre is the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And he also went publicly for the first time with the media to talk about what took place in that meeting with Marco Rubio. So this is the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Philip Pierre.
A very fruitful visit. We had discussions with the Secretary of State, Excellency Marco Rubio.
Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre made his first public appearance in St. Lucia following his recent trip to Washington, D.C., where he led an OECS delegation for high-level talks with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Discussions were linked to a relationship with the U.S., and it is very frank, it is very forthcoming. As we said to the U.S. are our neighbors. We share the same aspirations, we share the same hopes and the dreams for our people. We spoke about security.
Speaking to local media, the Prime Minister outlined key areas of discussion with a critical focus on the future of the Cuban medical program. The Trump administration had raised concerns about the program exploiting medical professionals, threatening to cancel visas for countries participating in the program.
We spoke about the Cuban presence as far as the doctors are concerned. We clarified that we obeyed all the laws as far as that was concerned. There's never a time when St. Lucia disobeyed these laws, where the ILO laws that related to labor were always there. And it was a very frank discussion, and I hope the U.S. and us, our relationship will be strengthened going forward.
The Cuban medical program has been touted for its importance to small island developing states in the Eastern Caribbean, many of which rely heavily on Cuban healthcare support. Prime Minister Pierre also reassured of St. Lucia's readiness to accept deported nationals, given the U.S. crackdown on undocumented immigrants.
These are the U.S.'s policies. We'll accept our locals. We'll accept our locals if they have to come back to St. Lucia. We hope that they are treated humanely, but we can never deny the people who come back to St. Lucia. Never deny them.
Okay, guys, so that was the Prime Minister of St. Lucia. And as I don't believe that there's anyone that's surprised about the items on the agenda that the American government would want to talk to the Eastern Caribbean about in terms of tariffs, in terms of the citizenship by investment program, the Cuban medical program. Those were all things that I believe that most of us that's following this news between the relationship between the Trump administration and what is going on in the Caribbean. I think everything that was on the agenda so far was expected. And I think it's interesting that the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines pointed out that in terms of the 10% tariff, that wasn't really a big agenda item for them, because they came to the understanding that, look, this is not something that would affect the Eastern Caribbean as much. And that was something that I said from day one when these tariffs were placed in effect, that, look, the ones that have to worry about this most is Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, and Guyana. That is where the bulk of the tariff would impact in terms of the Caribbean, because St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, they don't export a lot to the American market. So I don't think that it would affect their bottom line as much. And the Prime Minister came out and stated that. I think where most people be confused, I'm a bit confused, is what is the future of the Cuban medical program? Because we have seen where the Prime Minister of St. Lucia stated in that interview with the media that they pointed out their stance in terms of the Cuban medical program and that they were not breaking any international laws where that is concerned. But that was it. We didn't get an idea like if it's something that's going to continue or they're going to discontinue it. But while at the same time we're seeing out of Grenada that Grenada, they're talking with the Nigerian government in terms of getting more medical practitioners in Grenada. We saw where the Jamaican government is in talks with the government of the Philippines to get Filipino medical practitioners into Jamaica. So I don't think we're hearing the full story where the Cuban medical program is concerned. I think the leaders are pretty much keeping it like a hush-hush. So that is the only thing that, I would say we don't know what really is going on with that program. But everything else seems a bit straightforward. I think the citizenship by investment program will not be as impacted. The American government will not have much say on that program. I think that program is up to the United Kingdom and the European Union. And I think that is what we're going to be following for the rest of 2025 to see the development where the citizenship by investment program, the future of that program, because as I said, America is not going to determine that. I think it's going to be determined by the European Union and by the United Kingdom. So guys, sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on what the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the Prime Minister of St. Lucia had to say about their meeting with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Do you think the future, the relationship between America and the Caribbean, do you think that the future looks bright where that is concerned? Or do you think that things are going to get worse in the Caribbean because of our relationship with America? Sound off in the comment section and let me know your thoughts on this one. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing content. And remember, peace. I'm out.